Today's episode of the AnxietyRX Podcast, I have Colleen Kachman with me, who helps women live their best lives, even if they've had issues with alcohol in the past. So welcome, Colleen.
It's so good to meet you, Doctor. I've been binging your podcast and loving your book.
Great.
So,
Well, call me Russ. That's
okay.
Usually how I start. I'm pretty informal about that kind of stuff too. So kind of what led you into this? I imagine you had some anxiety when you were a younger person and found a way of treating it with alcohol in a way.
Yeah, I wouldn't have ever said I had anxiety per se because I was too busy being anxious to really figure that one out. I was just a high performing type A, go big or stay home. ADHD, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 39 years old, and I didn't really even understand what that meant. I see now I had a stimulation deficit. I like chaos versus peace.
Yeah.
So that led me to drinking, and I had other issues prior to drinking. I was bulimic for a really long time. And I now see that I was just doing the best I could to regulate my nervous system.
Yeah.
But I got sucked into the habit of drinking every single day. And yet nobody would have ever said I had a drinking problem. I had 4 kids, 3 step kids. I taught hot power yoga and ran marathons. And so how did I get into this was about COVID. It was when, a lot of people went in with their drinking habits and everybody took a big step down the spectrum of addiction. And so many women didn't ever return to what we would call more normal drinking. Right. And I was already far enough down the spectrum. I just hit a tailspin. I tried to drink my way through COVID. I made it about 6 weeks, gave it a good college try, and then finally said, I can't keep doing this. And did what most people do and get sober. And then that began my journey to where I realized at some point that it's not about the alcohol. That's the name of my podcast now. It's not about the alcohol. It's about the anxiety in your nervous system, your perfectionistic mindset, the bully in your brain. And so I got here by having lived through all of the different problem solving and finally coming to the realization that the answers I'm looking for are inside. And this is my relationship with my body. And I just never really understood that.
Yeah. Well, you said something earlier about creating chaos. And usually when I see people who can't get quiet, this is me too, and who have a relationship with chaos, usually it mirrors they had chaos when they were growing up. Is that the case with you?
Not so much in that we were busy. I was the oldest of 4 kids. I come from a very loving home. My parents are both still married. They're still alive. I'm the oldest of 4. I'm the best one. I'm the big sister. So I can't say it was chaotic, although of course, just doing some of your tools, there are moments in my brain that were traumatizing to me where, that alarm, that background alarm started going off. And I learned that I could get love by being perfect, being helpful, being quiet, being small. I would definitely say in my family, you weren't really allowed to feel your feelings. It's called get the hell over it, and then, come back out and have fun. So I can't say there was a lot of chaos. In fact, we moved a lot. I read a lot. I felt like an outsider a lot. So my chaos, I feel like was my own coping mechanism because I didn't know how to be okay with myself. I didn't have a good relationship with myself. I didn't even know what that meant. I saw myself through the world's eyes as I saw the world, not realizing that's a loop.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I write this in my book somewhere too. And that if your parents don't see your feelings and they don't see you for you, you don't see you for you. So you never really, you develop this interest in yourself when it kind of mirrors your parents' interest in you. So if you don't have that parental interest in you, you don't develop it on your own. And then we start looking for external things to kind of feed us external gratification, alcohol, all these different things that do soothe us in the short term. I mean, alcohol definitely, acts on your GABA receptors, your glycine receptors, and decreases the glutamate, the excitatory part. So if your brain is naturally leaning towards excitation, alcohol will be one of those things that's like, Oh, it kind of like so many people that have alcohol issues. It says like when I took a drink of alcohol, I felt normal. Like I have heard that line as a general practitioner and an anxiety specialist so many times. When I drink alcohol, I feel normal.
Well, your perspective on it in your book, there was one line that I have been able to give to my clients and I've used so many times that releases you of the shame in that alcohol is it is a drug. It is your medicine. It is what allows you to reconnect with that sense of safety in your nervous system. Now, then you keep going, it kicks you in the ass, it doesn't go well, but it is the one time of day. It's not alcohol that you're craving. You're craving relief.
Yeah.
And the relief that you need is coming from inside of your brain saying, you're never done. You're never good enough. It's not going to work out. And not knowing that the call is coming from inside the house, alcohol is and becomes, and that's how the habit forms. Most of my clients say, I don't know how to shut down my mind. I
Right.
can't shut down. And not only do I not know how, they don't say that. Actually, let me correct it. I can't shut down my mind. It doesn't ever shut off. They identify with the problem instead of thinking, okay, this is a skill and you can learn and there are tools for this. But that released so much inflammation in my own shame network of, how you get
Mm,
addicted to alcohol. It's a medication that shuts off that chatter and it does give you that sweet sense of relief for a little bit, and so
yeah.
it's very understandable.
And the problem with alcohol is that initially it will increase your GABA response. So it does increase, paradoxically, the part of your brain that settles you down. Now, what
Mhm.
your brain will do is it automatically looks for homeostasis. It automatically looks to sort of level the teeter-totter. So as soon as you get that inhibition, your brain goes, oh, we have to create excitation to kind of, you know, get back to that same kind of level we had before. On top of that, I think what happens is when we have anxiety, when we have this disconnection from ourselves for whatever reason, I think there is this abhorrence to connecting to yourself. When you're there, there's a lot of like self-reproach, shame, as you say. There's a lot of blocks there to connecting with ourselves. And what I think alcohol does when it activates our GABA receptors and calms down these circuits is it gives us this moment of calm for a second that we can actually connect with ourselves, like truly connect with ourselves. And then the problem is the excitation phase comes back in, and then you actually need to drink more alcohol to kind of regain that same sort of relaxation thing that you had in the first place. And then it becomes a severe depressant where all of your brain systems are shut down or at least impaired. The fact where you can't connect anymore anyway, because the parts of your brain that really want that connection, that really want that love and connection, they're being suppressed as well. I don't know if that makes sense, but it really is about this the brain's natural reaction to alcohol, which is initially this relaxation, muscle relaxation, and then this excitation that comes up 90 minutes later, which is the reason why when people take a drink, they fall asleep, but 90 minutes later they wake up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I think happens and the way I explain it to my gals is alcohol gives you a felt sensation of relief. Like you
Hmm.
feel that in your nervous system.
Yeah.
And just you and me talking, we're saying this phrase, connect with yourself, connect with yourself.
Hmm.
Like most of us overthinkers don't really know what that means. The way I teach it is your definition of self actually has to change. We think of ourselves as the personality, who we are, what we do, what we're about, what we care about, our successes and our failures, where we are in life, where we're going. That's our self, right? It's our self
Right.
identity. It's a mental construct, though. That's in your head. Your self is actually just a body. It's the body carrying you through all the bullshit you're running through and
Hmm.
understanding that the connection that you're looking for, it's not an idea. It's not approval. It's not permission or shame. It is a felt sense of being okay in the here and now. Your body lives in the present moment. It's
Hmm.
your brain that time travels to the future and the past. And
Yeah.
so recharacterizing this, what it means to connect with yourself. And that just means feeling safe and grounded and okay in the present moment. is, I think, a big thing people are missing. They don't understand what it means to connect with yourself. And you can't think about it. It's a feeling. And that's what alcohol provides.
Yeah. And I think that on that level, in the early phases of, when you first take your first drink of alcohol, there is this flush. There is this, there is this ability to go up and talk to somebody, to party. There is this, it drops your internal resistance to things. So if you're sitting at a party and you look across the way and you see someone you'd like to talk to, but you haven't had any alcohol, you're like, I can't do this. So the excitatory parts of your brain, the parts that are like, oh no, this is dangerous, like don't do this, and then you have a drink, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, I can go over and say something, and in the early stages it really works, which is why alcohol is such a addictive medication, because initially it works for sure. And it's kind of similar in a funny way to worry, because what worry does is it makes the uncertain appear more certain. And when we get that in our brain, we get this little dopamine hit. It's like, oh, okay, I'm on the right track. So, and I think what alcohol does is the same kind of thing. It's like, oh, I'm on the right track. I can connect to other people. I can connect to myself. And it gives you this false sense of, oh, this isn't me. But really, the alcohol is showing you, at least initially, who you are, how you can be connected. But when you take too much of it, it actually pulls you away. And this is the paradox that I find with alcohol, and the intrigue I have with your approach of, you don't have to quit completely. You can learn how to modulate once you've, and this is what I think with some people. I think some people are they lean so highly in the glutamate side, the excitatory side, that it's very difficult for them to pull back from that feeling of being good, being safe and comfortable. And I think that's why people keep drinking. And it's, I guess the trick is, how do you maintain that sort of inhibitory sensation more holistically without having to use the alcohol, which is, I think, when I look through your work, it's kind of like showing people, okay, this is how you process this in a different way.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I start with, there's so many things to learn, but alcohol is a drug. And it's the only drug you can buy at the store with no prescription from a doctor. And I'm not saying we need to prescribe alcohol, but there are no dosing instructions. There are no intervals. We are taught in this community, if you're a normal drinker, knock yourself out. And if you're an alcoholic, go to AA.
Right.
And so nobody understands that alcohol is actually a biphasic drug, which means small amounts and large amounts have opposite effects. The biphasic line is 0.055 blood alcohol level.
Okay.
And so that's about 2 drinks for women. And so you can get some of the therapeutic benefits of, of course, we want to do the work to actually manage the internal chatter in the mind and the anxiety. But in terms of using alcohol as a drug, you can get the therapeutic benefits without the cortisol release that occurs. If you start to drink into intoxication, your brain says, I can't get so relaxed, I forget to breathe. And so it starts triggering a cortisol dump, which also wakes you up in the middle of the night. And so teaching women how to drink mindfully so that they stay connected to their body. As a former heavy daily drinker, I used to drink a half a fifth of vodka a day while running all of my stuff. And now when I'm in that second glass of wine, somebody says, oh, can I refill? The words in my brain are, no, thank you. I am good, because I'm connected to my mind and body. What anxiety does is it disconnects us from the felt experience. Overthinking is just under feeling. So we disconnect from the truth of the experience. Well, when you understand that alcohol is a drug and that you can use it if you want to get a little bit less inhibited, you can do that. But once you cross the biphasic line, now you're hitting the wall of diminishing returns. What I teach women is the mantra, more alcohol will ruin my buzz. Like once you're buzzed, think of your buzz like a bucket. Can't fill it up anymore. Now it's just overflowing with cortisol and all of the other brain chemicals that aren't good. And we were never taught to drink. Like I went to college and I was trained by frat house hazing specialists
Right.
how to drink, go, chug, chug, shot.
Sure.
And so those beliefs that more alcohol is better. And if I want to really have fun, I need to really drink more. Those are just stupid 7th grade beliefs that are just still operating the bus. And when you really step back and say, how do I feel? I love a glass of wine. But when I hit that point where I know if I keep drinking, now my buzz is actually going to go down because I'm getting numb and disconnected and disoriented. Maybe the anxiety's kicking in because the cortisol has come out, or the cortisol has been released. So a lot can happen when you just realize alcohol is a drug and you can use it properly, but then you have to go against the beliefs that I can't stop once I start. My off switch is broke. No, alcohol is your off switch. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's, we're always taught in medicine that there are some people who just can't stop. As soon as they have that thing, the part of their brain that would tell them, hey, stop, is paradoxically and ironically paralyzed by the alcohol. So when you're sober, you think, okay, I can stop. No, I refuse, whatever it is. But as soon as they have that one drink, the part of them that would stop them from drinking is the part that gets paralyzed, which is kind of funny because it's the same kind of idea in anxiety, is that when we get into survival physiology, we get into norepinephrine, epinephrine, cortisol, we paralyze the rational part of our brain. And when we paralyze the rational part of our brain, this is why I'm not a big fan of CBT, because basically CBT leaves you when you need it the most. So when you're having an anxiety attack or you're in anxiety, you shut off the rational part of your brain that would actually tell you that you're okay, that you're safe. And I think that's one of the same things that happens with some people, not all people, but some people with alcohol, is it actually paralyzes the part of them that would stop.
Well, I hear you on that, but also science shows that there is no addiction gene. There is nothing about a
I agree with that.
person that stops them from learning. We teach
Yep.
people how to overcome urges. Stop, drop, and roll if you catch on fire. Turn your wheel out of the spin if you're slipping on ice. So this is why my program is a year long, because we have to deal with those urges, but the urge is a thought. It's just a word in your brain. It's a sensation that in the past you've decided that sensation means I need to drink more. If you slow it all down, anybody can learn to overcome an urge. We train kindergartners to look both ways before they chase that ball, and their brain is wired to chase the ball. It's their ball. It's my ball. And so I understand that some people may have more trouble with it. It might not be worth the effort, but having been somebody who qualified as somebody who was not capable because that part of my brain was paralyzed, I have learned and been able to wake up because I am highly motivated by pleasure, because that's how the brain learns. And I feel really good when I overcome that urge. I don't ever worry that I'm going to lose control because I have no desire. It sounds awful to me. A whole bottle of wine, which used to be a warm-up lap, now it's like, ugh. I like to feel hydrated. And so that's where I teach and your book has been so instrumental, is because really we can learn, our brains learn through felt sensation. So the idea that your brain gets paralyzed can be a limiting belief. Maybe it has been in the past, but introducing the idea that if I can learn because I enjoy feeling good and I'm perfectly capable of that, I think is also a very powerful move.
Yeah, there is this backlash against alcohol these days that no amount of alcohol is safe. Now, I don't know if you've come across those.
World Health Organization, I think, said that.
Yeah, so we're starting to get it. It used to be, like a glass of red wine or like 4 times a week was heart healthy. And now they're saying the opposite. So this is kind of like, I posted this the other day about internet hell. Internet hell, by my definition, is when you get 2 equally credentialed experts saying exactly the opposite thing. So what's the general population supposed to do, right? And I'm sure there are some people who are more susceptible to the toxic effects of ethanol. I'm sure there are, just genetically, and we all are. we all have different susceptibilities to different medications. And so why wouldn't we have the same thing with alcohol? So it's interesting how they make this blanket statement now that no amount is safe, like none. So it's, and then you have other people saying, no, it has some effect on like glucose metabolism, and it has some effect on fats in your system, HDL, LDL, that sort of stuff. So we're like, okay, what do we believe these days?
Well, I think it's fair to say that no amount of alcohol is safe, but they also say that about lunch meat. And drinking water out of plastic bottles, also not a good idea. And I think we all have to understand that there's a 100% mortality rate on this ride we call life.
Right.
And everybody has to decide for themselves. And so, I used to be, as a daily drinker, I was gut health and I was a coach and vegan, plant-based, 100%. That lunch meat's going to kill you. And I would tell you that while I was drinking red wine, because red wine is safe, like give everything 5 minutes and a new study is going to come out and somebody's going to, clickbait it. Now we're all going to think something different. Like the truth is in your body. I feel very good when I have a glass of wine. And that is one of the things I add to my list of things I'm willing to tolerate. I get in a car. That's not 100% safe. So I think it's fair to say alcohol is not safe. The stuff that said, I used to think drinking red wine was good for my health, and that's why I needed a whole bottle every day.
A lot of people did.
It's a good correction to say it is not safe, but I think what they're saying is like, you don't need it. And there's always risk with any drug that you take,
Yeah, I think that's true. I have a friend, when I used to do a lot of stand-up, I had a friend, Damon Schroeder, who had this joke, and he would often start out with his routine. And Damon has this kind of stoner voice, although he's not a stoner. And he would say, "Hey, they say if you don't drink, you'll live longer." And he says, "I don't think that's true. I just think it seems longer." So Damon, if you're listening to this, I always love that opening, how you used to open that way.
Yeah.
Well, there is this thing called hormesis, right? Which is when you stress the system comes back stronger, right? So they're saying that sometimes with radiation, when people have a lot of CAT scans and that kind of thing too, there may be this sort of thing, it almost like homeopathy, where it stimulates the reaction of the body to kind of heal itself. And if you capture it in a certain way, which it sounds like that's what you're doing, you can gain the benefits of it without actually incorporating a lot of the risk. And everything, of course, like we said, is risk benefit. It's all risk benefit, pretty much everything. So it's understanding, if this is something that really helps you and makes it through this thing we call life, great. But if it's something you have to do, you're drinking, like you said, a bottle of wine as a starter, that's when you start getting into problems, real problems. So I just found I find your approach really interesting, because it's so antithetical to the AA thing. And even now, like I read the other day where we can't call people alcoholics anymore. You have to call them alcohol use disorder. So again, we're getting into the sort of woke mentality, which on some level I think is great. It's inclusive. But on some level, I think we're just kind of subdividing everything, chopping up everything into these small, tiny, bite-sized pieces. And like I said, making it so easy on people that we don't build any resilience anymore. There's no emotional resilience. You need something to stress you before you can start building that emotional resistance in you. Now, unfortunately, usually with emotional things, that emotional stress, once it starts, it snowballs. And it's very hard for you to recover on your own, which is why I wrote the book and I write my programs and that kind of thing too. But it's understanding that we need some pushback in life. And I think one of the reasons why we have such a mental health crisis with our kids is we've made things so much easier for them. And on top of that, we've given them these handheld supercomputers so they never get bored. If you never get bored, there's no self-soothing. If there's no boredom, there's no self-soothing. So when you actually need to self-soothe, you can't do it anymore. Now, I went off on a little rant there.
Well, what
So,
I think the big picture is, I also agree that putting everybody in these boxes, do you have bipolar 2 or do you have bipolar 3
mhm.
or what? Like, it
Yes.
doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
Ooh, sorry.
No, it's
It's
okay. No,
it's
no, no.
in
It's fine.
your body. And like the way I teach with alcohol, there is no right amount to drink. There's no safe amount to drink. Because if you think there is, then you disconnect from the truth.
Mm,
Sometimes I'm at a party extra long and I'm on my third glass of wine and I'm
mm,
enjoying myself and it's amazing. And sometimes I take 2 sips and my body says, nah, I
mm,
don't like this. And whether alcohol, because of like for me, alcohol is something that affects my brain in a positive way. Asian descent, not always the same. Like everybody's got a
mm,
coping mechanism of choice. And the truth is, I think part of the spiritual part of being a human being is I don't care how traumatic your childhood was or was not, the world can be divided into 2 types of people: the people who are either being managed by their anxiety, by their childhood trauma, by their demons, or the people who are managing them. And
mm,
everybody gets here some way, whether it's alcohol, whether it's food, whether it's multiple marriages or workaholism or spending too much or other pharmaceutical drugs. You go into the doctor on a hamster wheel and just
mhm.
gimme, gimme, gimme.
Totally.
And so the bottom line is that for me, I no longer think I had a drinking problem. I had an invitation that I just didn't accept for a while. And the
Mm,
invitation was to have, as we talked about in the beginning, that relationship with myself, caring about myself, listening to the truth in my body instead of letting my brain and whatever article I just read be the truth, that I'm going to
right.
live by now.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I think we do store this alarm in our system, as I call it, background alarm. And a lot of it is sort of obvious trauma from childhood. Like for me, my father was bipolar and schizophrenic, and that was very traumatic for me. So it did sort of come out in my system, in my body. It's still there, as a matter of fact, but I just don't give it that much credibility anymore. I see it as the younger version of me asking for connection now. So I put my hand over it, I breathe into it, I stay with it. And I've learned how to stay with that uncomfortable sensation long enough without having to shoot up into my head. Because what I did as a child and a young adult, and an adult in general, was as soon as I would feel this, I wouldn't be aware that I was feeling this alarm in my body. I would just go into worry. Because as soon as I skip up into my head, I've now sort of temporarily escaped this alarm that's stuck in my body. So it distracts you into this particular place where it's not comfortable, but it's more comfortable than actually facing the alarm head on. Now, when you start facing the alarm head on, that's when you really start to heal. So most people with anxiety are trapped in this thing where they have this unconscious belief that the worry is actually keeping them protected. It's keeping them away from that alarm, which it is on some level. But you'll always be there. You'll always be in that sort of limbo state because you're never actually dealing with the underlying problem, which is one of the other reasons why I'm not that crazy about talk therapy or CBT, even though it helps. I'm not saying it doesn't help, but it just basically kind of dangles people over the gates of hell because it sort of shows them falsely that you can manage a feeling issue with a thinking solution, and you can't. You have to learn how to feel it, and you've got to feel it to heal it. You've got to be able to stay with that alarm and learn that, yeah, I don't like this feeling at all. It's very painful, but I can stay with it. I can stay. It's like I have this thing with cold plunges. Like I've been late in the last year or so doing these cold plunges where I will
Mm.
go into this water that's 35 or 38 degrees or whatever, and you stay in it and it's horrible, and in your brain is screaming at you like, get out of the get out of the water. But part of it is that I have control. I can get out of the water, and my brain says you can get out of the water now if you want, or you can just sort of stay here. And then there is these phases where it's like, hey, you know what, this isn't so bad. And then it's, oh,
Yeah.
this is horrible, oh, this isn't so bad. So what you do is you learn how to tolerate this cold. And it's a real metaphor for handling the alarm in your system, because if you can stay with the alarm and not retreat up into your thoughts and get into that old hamster wheel that you'll never get off of, you can start actually treating the root cause of this alarm, which is fundamentally a disconnection of your adult self from your child self. And I think that's what when you say you have a drink, I think what's really happening is that, you're becoming more holistically connected to yourself. initially.
For sure. And now I would tell you, I don't ever pour alcohol on the alarm.
Mm,
Nothing makes me more mad than, I'm looking forward to a nice evening and some wine, going out to dinner, and then something pisses me off or something triggers me, because I personally have a policy where I don't pour alcohol on that, because whether you do alcohol or just distract yourself and keep going,
hmm.
all you're doing is hitting the snooze button. It's
Yeah,
going to come back on. And the
absolutely.
motivation is understanding that everything you want, your superpower, is on the other side of everything you don't want to stop and feel.
Hmm. That's true.
And it's like, for me, I know that getting to the bottom, sometimes I'm just tired. Sometimes it's like there's this subtle rock in my shoe. Something happened and I was too busy to really notice it. And that
Mm,
alarm starts getting louder and louder. And I realize my body, that takes in 11 million bits of information per second. My brain's only doing like 40. So
mm,
I miss a lot, but my body doesn't. And so when you realize that anxiety is telling you that, something, you need to pay attention, it's like a rock in your shoe.
right.
It's very nice to stop and take the rock out of your shoe. And I know with people who have a lot of anxiety and years worth of unpacking, it can feel very overwhelming. But you can also do a controlled release, a little bit at a time, and just learning to experience that felt sensation of safety, because that is that motivates the brain to want to return there. And
Hmm.
once you experience that connection, you can get addicted to that. Like, I'm addicted to
Oh, yeah.
feeling connected as opposed to chicken with my head cut off, out of balance, pants on fire.
Which is what alcohol does initially, is it is makes you feel connected, I believe, to yourself. And
Yes.
then I think what happens is, because we're sort of operantly, almost, well, Pavlovian conditioning, because as soon as you take that drink, you couple alcohol with feeling relaxed, feeling connected to yourself. So it's like, well, if one drink worked, two drinks will work better. And just like people with Tylenol, it's like, if two tablets help, well, 10 will be way better. So our brains are conditioned, almost like Pavlov's dogs, to go, okay, alcohol means relaxation. And after the two drinks, we don't have that sort of rational ability, or that part of our rational brain is kind of blunted. So that underlying feeling of, this is helping me, keeps going. So you just keep, and I think there is an incremental, like, as you say, the law of diminishing returns. As you have your third, fourth, fifth drink, there is this incremental, rise. You keep the high going in a way, but you start chasing it now. Now you're chasing it. Whereas initially, if you have one drink or maybe two drinks and you stay with that, you can sort of use that to connect with yourself. But after that point, even though your brain has been conditioned to tell you, alcohol makes me feel closer to myself, you can come in there and, I don't know what I'm trying to say exactly, but rationally come in. I think this is what you're saying and you're teaching, is that you can rationally come in at that point, teaching yourself different phrases or whatever it is, or however you program your own brain to kind of go, no, this isn't going to help me. Right. So it's overriding that sort of natural learning that we do as human beings. It's like, okay, alcohol works to make me feel better, so I'll just keep drinking.
Yeah. That's why I do, like, in my program, we do mindful drinking experiments where because
What's that look like?
where you drink by yourself and you practice feeling that biphasic line, so that
Mm,
it becomes intuitive, so that you can tell when you are buzzed, and then they have to stop when they feel the buzz. And then
mm,
you notice, oh, that buzz lasts like an hour. The two biggest bullshit that we tell ourselves is that I need a lot to get to feel
right.
like I need more than other people. Like, no, 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 you don't have a high tolerance for alcohol. You have a high tolerance for not paying attention to your body and what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. You have a high tolerance for
Fair enough.
ignoring yourself. And so so they have to learn. And mindful drinking is kind of similar to dog training. You have a little puppy and it sits in the kitchen and you give it a treat and it wags its tail and you're standing 1 foot away and you're paying full attention to the dog, and you're connected to the dog. There's the metaphor there, and the dog will
Mm,
obey. You take that puppy to the dog park, let it off leash 100 yards away where there's squirrels and grass and people and smells, and say, sit. The dog cannot perform that skill. Didn't even
Yeah.
hear you.
Right.
And so mindful drinking, what I do is you learn, you can't go to a party where you're stressed out and your boss is watching you and that lady that was mean to you yesterday, and then perform the skill of mindful drinking. The habit in your brain of more alcohol is what I need right now, that will take over. If you want to change, you have to give yourself the bandwidth to do something different. It's not drinking mindfully and in a way that feels good that's a problem. It's just different if it's been a habit of not doing it. You know, it's like turning right instead of left. Your body's like, well, I think we should go. I mean, it just feels that felt sensation. And so I teach women to learn to drink by themselves and then understand there's an upward spiral of skill development. You know, you cannot, I don't drink in stressful situations, because I don't want to. But if I did, I might experience less control because I'm not paying as much attention to my body. You know, you have to reserve about 25% of your attention on yourself and then just expand your ability to hold that focus when you're in higher and higher stressful or stimulating environments.
Yeah, I find this really interesting because it kind of goes against a lot of the dogma, specifically from, medical school and AA and all that kind of stuff. It's like, no, you must completely stop. This is just something that's, it's a disease. When Norm Macdonald talks about that too, the late great Norm Macdonald says, my cousin Richie, he has a disease they call alcoholism. And then Norm says, as far as diseases go, I think you got the best one.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting because it kind of goes against how I was trained, right? So I have to kind of go, okay, let's just
I know.
allow
Well,
this to
it's
kind of filter
similar
through
to
and see.
medical school. They don't teach you about nutrition either. You know,
No.
you're trained in pharmaceuticals.
Yep.
There is a lot of research, Russ, that shows that alcoholism is not a disease because it's the only disease you can just stop having. And to tell yourself you have a disease when it's been years since you've had a drink, now you're just dealing with the mental construct here. So like
Yeah.
addiction itself is real, but the idea of it's more of, it is a habit. You learned to think and drink the way you did, and you can learn to think and drink differently if you are motivated. People who change the way they drink because they think it will make them happy are able to easily adjust. AA is not science-based. In fact, going to AA reinforces the very beliefs that perpetuate the problem. Because you're being told that you can't control yourself and that one drink leads to you living in a van down by the river drinking mouthwash out of a paper bag.
Right.
And I know when I went to AA, they were saying, you got to get the vanilla extract out of your house. And I was like, why? And they're like, because there's alcohol in it. And I was like, oh shit. Okay, so what? And they're like, well, you might drink it if you get really triggered. And I was like, I had not ever thought. And there are studies that show, getting indoctrinated into that culture, they teach each other to restory their whole lives. Suddenly people are like, I knew I was an alcoholic when I was 3 years old. Really? And it's just a filter, a storytelling. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In AA, the reason their efficacy rates are 5 to 10% is because unless you get the tattoo and start leading the meetings, most people reintroduce alcohol at some point. And if you reintroduce alcohol on the belief that if you have one drink, it's going to lead to a relapse, then that's the self-fulfilling prophecy. Addiction is a state of belief that you can't stop once you start, or that you need a substance to feel better. Those are words in your head, not facts in your body.
Yeah. I guess it comes down to, how much can you consciously control an unconscious desire? And really, when we drink or we take any sort of medication that kind of gives us that buzz, that soothe, whatever, we are connecting with that younger version of ourselves, I believe, especially trauma, because there's a huge link between childhood trauma and alcoholism. And I think it's, a lot of people are self-medicating because it does, my version, and I said this a little earlier, is that we develop these blocks to connecting with ourselves. As
Yes.
there's a part of our brain called the posterior cingulate cortex, which is part of the default mode network. And I'm not going to get too technical, but basically the posterior cingulate cortex is kind of thought to be involved in self-referential thought, like what you think about yourself. So if you have all this judgment, abandonment, blame, and shame towards yourself, it sits in this posterior cingulate cortex. Now, again, this is a simplification. And then that's our default state. So when you default, when you're not doing something specifically with your brain goes into this default mode network. And if part of the default mode network is you're a piece of shit to yourself and you take a drink and you don't feel that, there is this sense like, oh, I'm on the right track. This is good. This helps me. But then on top of that, when you have 3 drinks and then you're sitting in an AA meeting, it's like you are a piece of shit. You're in the AA meeting, right? So it's really interesting to see how these cognitive, self-reinforcing, attempting to be helpful processes just wind us up into the same old view or root of addiction again. Like we're not actually escaping it at its fundamental core level, which, as you said earlier, is a feeling state. It's not a thinking state. You don't think your way out of addiction. You feel your way out.
Right. Right. Yeah. And even the default mode network can be reprogrammed. It takes time, but my brain no longer tells me that I'm a piece of shit. And when I have a feeling that might indicate that I'm not pretty enough in any given situation, it's like, for me, my alarm, now I interpret that alarm as like a little tattletale. My body is telling on my brain that there's bullying and hate speech or harassment or nastiness. And so I use my alarm to tell me, okay, whoa, like, okay, something's going on here and I'm team body. And whatever's going on. But you also have to understand that you have to learn how to change the way you respond. But when you respond to your alarm and in a loving kindness, compassionate way, and give yourself time and space to either just breathe or to actually cognitively process, like whatever you need to do. Like once you figure out that you living in a synced up mind and body is the superpower, then I think anybody can learn to do this. And we should be teaching this in kindergarten.
Well, yeah. Well, that's why I teach the ABCs. Like that's what I came up with myself was, the first one is awareness. Like be aware of, I guess, your trigger. I want to drink. Be aware of that. And then instead of staying in your head with that and trying to say, well, you shouldn't drink because this will live, no, it's like immediately do not pass go, do not collect $200, immediately go into your body and breath. Immediately put your hand over where you feel that alarm in your body, if you're aware of it, and just breathe into that and just stay with that. And then as you're there, you can say to yourself, am I safe in this moment? You can be safe in that moment in your body. But it's a matter of sort of getting out of your head first. And once you ground yourself in your body, then you can bring these cognitive strategies back. But as I said before, when you're in survival mode with norepinephrine, epinephrine, cortisol, all these neuropeptides running around in your system that telling you you're going to die, there's danger, you lose the rational part of your brain. And you also lose the credibility that you give the rational part of your brain. So what happens is that you start believing things that are not really true. And then it reinforces that same belief over and over again. And you just follow that same loop. So you have to get into your body first, ground yourself in your body, and then you can go back into your mind.
Yeah. No, I believe it. And, even the idea that I want to drink, even if you can just recognize that as the notification, that is turn the wheel left instead of right. The body doesn't ever crave. Craves water and nutrition and sleep and movement and sunlight. And recognizing the thought itself that I want more alcohol as the notification to use the zoom feature on your brain, zoom out of this timeline, get out of the here and now appeal of the relief of the alarm, and remember that what's waiting for you in this resistance or avoidance is a felt sensation. I think you can, I've learned, and this is how I teach my women, like you said, you can't think your way out of it. You have to feel, but just remembering, you stop believing everything you think. Right. And thoughts are habits too. Thoughts are the habits that need to change. Yeah. If you felt safe and grounded and connected, you would drink like somebody who's safe and grounded and connected. Like that's just the bottom line.
Yeah. But your thoughts can't change your thoughts. It's your body that actually metabolizes and gives you the ability to change your thoughts. A knife can't cut itself, an eye can't see itself. we have to understand we worship the mind in this society. We think the mind can do everything. And really, it can do a tremendous amount of things, but it can't do it when it's running for its life. You
Right.
have to have a grounded body below it first. And then you can actually use the parts of this amazing prefrontal cortex that we have. But if we try and prematurely tell ourselves something while we're still in this survival alarm state, it just doesn't stick. And it has no real credibility because, in the medicine of ancient India, the Ayurvedic medicine, they call thoughts vata, air. Like there's nothing to them. We need to ground ourselves first in the body. Once you ground yourself in the body, then you can go back into your thoughts. But your thoughts aren't going to help you when you're in there. In fact, your thoughts are probably going to make you worse.
Yeah. So when you say that, I feel like I've heard you say that, of course there has to be words. We use words to direct ourselves
Yes,
to get into
for
our
sure.
body. But, it's very simple. The five senses or breath work, what are your favorite tools that aren't thinking, but there's got to be words in your brain to remind you
Sure.
to do it. So what
No,
are
it's
those
true.
words?
It's true. It's basically just developing the awareness that of my bodily sensation and have that sort of immediately sort of ring this alarm in my cognitive mind, like, oh, you're an alarm right now. Like for me, it's in my solar plexus. So when I feel it, it's like I'm so far ahead of my thoughts now because I know the origin of it is this place in my body, in my solar plexus. So I go right there. So I breathe into it. Physiological sigh, I think, is great. I add something to it sometimes. So I'll breathe in, hold it at the top, and then put my hand over my solar plexus and then breathe out slowly. And just feel my shoulders drop, feel my jaw relax, feel the air going through my nostrils, like really get into sensation. I have this little mantra that I use. It's called sensation without explanation.
I
So when you
love it.
tell yourself that, it basically puts you into this state like, oh, we're going into sensation. Oh, well, what about this? And then no, 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 no. No, we're gonna stay in sensation for a while, even though it's uncomfortable. But a lot of time it is. When you first start going into your alarm, it is uncomfortable. It's hard. And that's why it's so hard to heal from anxiety, because what we've been doing is we skip up into worry. And it's been such a almost Pavlovian, like operant conditioning, that worry does actually help me escape from this alarm. But you're always going to be on that treadmill. So it's like, can I learn to stay with the sensation and just learn to metabolize it and learn to get around? I call it getting around the other side of it. So it's just
Yeah.
basically going into my body, going into my breath, and just starting to get this almost deep sense that I am the seer, I am the witness. I can see my thoughts now. I am not my thoughts. I can see them. I have this little almost vision that I'm looking at my thoughts, but I'm not them. So when I get to that state, then I know it's like, okay, I can go back into my thoughts and really start to see what they're trying to tell me in a way. Because the thoughts aren't bad necessarily. It's just that they trap you. They try to entrap you away from the alarm in your body, and you'll never get out of it. Once you start believing your thoughts, you'll never get out of that loop
Right.
unless you start going into your body. So physiological sigh is one of them. There's another thing that I say: if you have to use cognition, tell yourself, I'm safe in this moment. Or ask yourself, am I safe in this moment? I know that I'm paranoid about this and this is going to happen. And oh my God, this is horrible. I hope that doesn't happen. But can you say to yourself, okay, in this moment, I know I'm freaked out in the middle of the night, but am I safe in this moment? Like right now, am I safe? It's like, well, yes, you are. And then my mind will argue, but. And it's like, no, 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 buts. No, no, no.
Yeah.
In this moment, which is all we ever have, are you safe? It's like, yes, I'm safe. And then you just stay with your body and you learn how to stay with your body for longer and longer periods of time. And it's kind of analogous to what you're saying about the buzz from the alcohol. It's like, okay, I can stay in this. This is okay. This actually feels safe to me. This feels all right to me. And then once you learn on that feeling state that I can actually create a safe place for myself, then you're more likely to keep creating a safe place for yourself instead of immediately rushing into your worries.
Yeah. Well, there's one also you talk about, and that is with the felt sensation going into where you feel safe. And this was my takeaway from
Okay.
your book that worked for me. I love a good foot massage. I don't know if I just am very sensitive on my feet, but that to me is when I don't know where to go and I'm in my head, I just wiggle my toes and I like pick them up and down. This sounds
Mm-hmm.
gross, but like I can feel
No.
them, like they stick to the floor, and then when I pull them up, there's a sensation there. And to me, that's my safe place. And it's funny because my mom and I used to rub our feet when we would sit on the
Yep.
couch and rub each other's feet.
It's maybe where it comes from.
And so for, the size and the breathing and all of that is good too, but also going into that place where you don't feel any sensation. So there's an argument to be made to go into the heart of the alarm and really put your consciousness there. But if it's too much too soon, like I just like to just
It's
wiggle my toes
re-traumatizing.
and my feet
Oh,
and then
yeah.
bring myself back down, and then I can go into the alarm. There's a
Yeah.
lot of steps, but finding a safe place in your body. I had never heard it put that way until you explained it that way.
What way?
To find where you
What way
feel
is?
safe in your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because there's
Yeah.
usually a place that, in somatic experiencing training, they teach us. It's like, okay, yes, this place for me is in my solar plexus. I was talking with a woman a couple of weeks ago who had a mother who was very domineering, very like, don't gain weight. This is all this. And her alarm was in her throat because I think she had all this energy backed up because she wanted to say something to her mother, but she couldn't. So it was all blacked up there. So it's like, okay, put your hand over that place of alarm. And immediately she said, I feel better when I feel connected to that place, because I do feel that that place of alarm is a remnant of your younger self, your wounded younger child, whatever you want to call it. And then when you put your hand over it, like that child doesn't feel alone anymore because the sensation of it, we know consciously, like, okay, that child's not here anymore, but are they, in the unconscious, in the feeling state? Yeah, we can connect with that younger version of ourselves. And then I said, okay, where's a place that feels good in your body or neutral? And in some people, it's the tip of their elbow because they, there's so much trauma, like they're so lit up all over. It's like, no, it's all over. I can't escape it. It's like, okay, what about the tip of your elbow? It's like, well, I don't think I feel it there. It's like, okay, well, let's go to the tip of your elbow for a minute. And let's just feel that tip of your elbow. It's like, well, I don't feel anything. I said, that's the freaking point.
Yeah.
I don't want you to feel anything. I want you to be able to have a little respite from this alarm that's stuck in your throat. So we went back and forth about 5 times. And she's like, oh, I've never actually seen this alarm as this version of me who wanted to tell my mother, like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And now that she has this place in her elbow, she says, what I do now, and she sent me an email and said, what I do now is I just, do that thing where you put your hand on your shoulder and then you put the other hand over your elbow. And it's like, I just connected that part of my elbow. And it's like, I don't feel anything, but that's still way better and way more, it transduces the alarm, because it tells you the alarm isn't all of you. It's not all of you. It's only part of you. And then I think once we see that this alarm is only part of us, because when we were a child, that alarm did feel like all of us. It did feel insurmountable. It did feel like the indomitable giant. But now it doesn't, if you create another place in your body that feels safe, or at least neutral.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, how I go about it is like, we have to heal this at a feeling level. It's not something that you can read about or study or whatever. You can use those, those cognitive strategies after you've grounded yourself in your body, and they will help you, but they're not going to heal you.
Well, to speak to that, like you can spend years and years in therapy figuring out why you are the way you are. But when you learn how to feel in your body and reconnect with safety and connection and groundedness, you think like that. So like so many of
Yeah.
our mental problems, like I call them entertainment purposes only. Like your stories are for entertainment purposes only.
Sure.
You can pop some popcorn and tie it all together and figure it all out. But the bottom line is you could cut through the bullshit and learn how to feel your elbow, feel your toes, modulate back and forth between where the energy, because it's energy. Like the brain speaks English, but the body just speaks energy.
Yeah.
And there's actually there's no positive and negative energy. It's all energy. And just one of them is attached to, it's kind of pointing the wrong way, imploding, and it's hurting and it feels traumatizing, but that's your energy. And if you can just allow it to exist, you can redirect it in the flow that you want. You don't have to sit around and talk about all of it forever.
Yeah.
How boring.
And then you get to the place where you actually embrace it as the younger version of you asking for your attention.
Yes.
Right. So often what we'll do is we'll feel this alarm unconsciously and we'll push it away, and we push it away by zipping up into our heads. So how would I, the little example I said, if a child came up to you in a store, like 5 years old, crying because they couldn't find their parents and holding their hands up to pick them up. I guess in these days we have to watch out for that sort of thing, but you would pick them up, right? You would soothe them.
I would.
So
Maybe
it's
you
the same.
wouldn't.
Yeah, maybe I wouldn't have the chance
I'm
of
a
doing that,
girl.
but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But it's, why don't we do that for ourselves? Like, it's the alarm is that child in you, like putting their hands up saying, love me, care for me, I'm safe. I don't feel safe. You have to show them that, you are safe. And it takes a while. And that's the thing why emotional dysregulation takes so long to heal, because initially, and this is one of the biggest things, is that initially your ego will actually ramp up your anxiety because it thinks that the worries were keeping you safe. So as you move away from your worries, the ego in you freaks out because it's like, well, this was the only childhood coping strategy that worked when you were a child. We can't leave this. So it's almost like breaking through the bubble. You have to keep going. You have to keep staying with your body, even though your mind is screaming at you to go back to the worries, because eventually it will pop and it will get to this place where you can actually feel and allow yourself to feel. So as we kind of wind down, Colleen, what's the biggest misconception, or what's the biggest message you would like to get out to the world?
You don't have a drinking problem. You have a thinking problem. And the more you think about your drinking problem, the worse it's going to get. The more you focus on it, the more you pay attention, the more you identify with that. Only people who can't trust themselves would, go to meetings, not to say you can't get support.
Yeah.
But if you identify with a drinking problem, what that really is indicating is that there's a disconnect and you don't trust yourself to feel the truth in your own body. You're stuck in your head. And the biggest thing I want to say to anybody listening is that it's not about the alcohol. You're using alcohol to cope with something. And so thinking you're bad and ashamed, or you can never drink again, like just put all of those thoughts. You can decide, you can change your mind any damn time you want.
Right.
You probably think you're going to never drink again every morning, and then you change your mind by 5 o'clock.
Right.
So let's not put too much stock in your thoughts. And you can 100% overcome it. I've worked with hundreds of women, and they have come all the way through to the other side where it's not a problem. They're mostly soberish, but they love to have wine or what, it's not about the alcohol.
Right. So how do people find you?
My podcast is called It's Not About the Alcohol. And then I am on TikTok and Instagram as The Hangover Whisperer.
Ooh.
I know. Yeah.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks so much, Colleen. I really appreciate it. It's been really interesting talking to you, because a lot of this stuff, as a medical doctor, I was kind of trained like, no, that's not true. But one of the things I learned about anxiety in general is just taking in extra other people's frames of reference. Medical doctors were so rigid about things. And one of the things about being a practicing medical physician is that I think that you do get rigid and you do start thinking that your way is the only way. And one of the things that I love about, breaking free of medicine in a way, not that I love medical doctors, they're really important, but it just allowed me to kind of have a 360 view of the world, as opposed to this way that I was indoctrinated into thinking. So I really appreciate you being here, and hopefully we'll have you on again and talk again soon.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.